Would you please tell us your name?
My name is Charles, better known as Ray Vogler.
Where do you live, Ray?
At the present time, I live up on Parsons Avenue. Been there about 30 years, but I was born and raised on Clay Hill.
I see. And would you tell us what you did before you went to the service?
Well, I started school at the Parsons Street School, better known now where the VFW is, and I went through the 3rd grade over there and transferred over to St. Mary's in the 4th grade, went on through and graduated from high school.
What year was that?
I graduated in 1946. While I was in high school, about my junior year, I started my military career. I joined the State Guard. This is when the National Guard got called out, and them days when if you could shave, even though you're a little underage, you could join the Guard. So I joined the Guard with a lot of fellows around town and put in 23 months. While I was working, or while I was going to school, I worked part-time at the Oneida Markets. The Oneida Markets was down on Church Street, where Jimmy Monahan has his medical building next to his drugstore. So I worked part-time in the Oneida Markets, went to school. After I graduated from school in June, I joined the Army in July of 1946. And I traveled, I was inducted in Albany, New York, and I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey for my induction. You got all your shots and your clothes and were processed into the Army. And one of my disappointments came then because my name being Vogler with a V, I was the last one to get on the train to go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I had made friends with 2 fellows from Rochester, New York, a fellow by the name of Dick Wheel and Art Winters, W's. And them guys went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and I was kind of disappointed because these were some of the guys that I had grown to know early in the service. While at Fort Bragg, I took field artillery basic training, and they weren't the self-propelled. I don't think they had any self-propelled armor at the time, and took basic training on the 105 howitzers. I made a lot of friends there. There was 2 fellows from Albany, New York that was in my battery, and a good friend of mine who slept in the bottom bunk was from Sale Creek, Tennessee. And after basic, we split up, and this fellow from Sale Creek, Tennessee went on to, we both went to Japan, but they would never tell me where he was because he went with the CIC or CID, and he traveled in civilian clothes, and he was one of the guys who was looking for these guys in the black market. So after basic, want to go on this way?
Yeah.
After basic, I come home on what they call a delay en route, and met up with these 2 fellows from Albany, went on to Chicago, Camp Stoneman, California, and that was in probably October, late October of 1946. I went from Camp Stoneman, we got on a ferry, went down to San Francisco, boarded ship, and had my supper, went up on a fantail after, and I was talking with a civilian type fellow who was going over to work for the government. And I told the guy, I think I'm getting a little seasick. This is before we even left San Francisco. He said, that's your imagination. So we stayed there a few minutes, and I showed him my imagination. I got sick. We sailed underneath the Golden Gate at about, never forget it, 6:15 on November 2nd, 1946. It took us about, I got seasick, but the next day I was fine. We enjoyed the trip. It took us about 12 days to get to Japan. When we pulled into Tokyo Bay, because of the war, there was still a lot of ships that had been sunk, and the masts were sticking above the water. So that was quite impressive for a young fellow myself. I was only 17 years old when I shipped out of the country, and I don't think they would do that today.
No.
I spent my 18th birthday in Japan.
No, that's something, that's different.
I got assigned to a transportation battalion. And what our job was to, I worked in the office as a clerk typist. Our job was to deliver the goods from the docks to the various units throughout the area. Sometime, it was after Christmas of 1946, a fellow by the name of Lieutenant William Duffy from Seacliff, Long Island, was being sent up to a place called the Atsugi Air Base, and this is where the Japanese trained their kamikaze pilots. He was going to run a motor pool up there, which was in operation. And he was interviewing some of the people that was going to go up there with him. And he asked me, what would I like to do? Well, young fellow, I wanted to drive truck. That's all I wanted to do. Well, he said, I need a clerk typist in the office. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, you will go in the office and clerk type for me, type requisitions, dispatch vehicles. I'll see that you get your driver's license. I did, and he did. He used to send somebody with me an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, different days, and we'd go out on the airfield and practice driving, and that's where I learned to drive, was at the air base. I got a lot of experience driving the trucks, because when the truck drivers who would come in at night, they would go to the barracks and have their trucks parked outside. So me, being full of vim and vinegar, I wanted a little more experience, I would offer to take the trucks back to the motor pool and turn them in for these guys. No problem. So I got a lot of experience driving back and forth to the
What
motor
size
pool.
trucks were these?
2.5 ton trucks. And I drove everything. I got to learn to drive up to the 10-ton wrecker we had, was the biggest one. We had deuce and halves, quarter tons, 3/4 tons, ambulances, and we had two different wreckers. One was a light wrecker and the other was a I forget what it was. 10-ton wrecker was the biggest one we had. So then I would take and drive to Yokohama. And never drove deuce and a half to Tokyo. But while we were in Yokohama, the city was devastated. There was only 3 or 4 buildings, as I can recall, that was still standing. One was a Red Cross building. It was used for the GIs, for coffee, donuts, games. It's sort of a happy hour type thing at night. And another one was used for our PX. And another building that was standing over there was the hospital. The hospital wasn't touched at all. And I'm not quite sure if that might have been the hospital that Leo Mahar went to after he came back from Korea. He got wounded in Korea. So after I got transferred up to the Atsugi Air Base, like I said, I worked in the office and drove truck. I didn't do an awful lot of traveling in Japan. However, I did get a chance to climb Mount Fuji. I went up above the timberline, and Mount Fuji was one that you could see from the whole area that I was in. And as the spring progressed into the summer, you could see the snow gradually recede up to the top of the mountain. But no time during the year did, as I can recall, the snow disappeared. Then as the fall set back in, you could see the snow come back down. Getting back to these two fellows from Rochester, Art Winters and Dick Wheel, we got separated. I went to this unit in Yokohama, and they got sent to the 1st Cav Division. And they got sent to, I can't think of the name of the camp, Camp McGill, just by Yokosuka Naval Air Base. And we saw each other quite frequently over there. And Dick and I remained friends. After I come home, like I said, I joined the Guard, and Dick had people in Watertown, New York, so different times I would call him, and he would come up to Watertown, and we'd see each other. So then, after my tour of duty in Japan, I got sent home.
Well, when's your tour? Could you give us some dates so we get some idea when you came home?
Yeah, when I first went over to Japan, I went to the replacement depot, 4th replacement depot at Zama, Camp Zama they called it. And I put my name on a wall, as a lot of GIs did. And lo and behold, about 2 weeks after I went through, Billy Laporte came through and saw my name on the wall. He told me about it when he got back home. In October of 1947, I got transferred back to the States. I was being ready for discharge. And I came to Fort Lawton, Washington. And then I was discharged in Fort Lawton, Washington, come home. And being that I was in the military, I spent 23 months in the State Guard prior to, I joined the National Guard on the first night they had their drill after I got home. I joined the Guard as a private and worked my way up through First Sergeant. I joined, ironically, the 27th Infantry Division, landed at Sugi Air Base. That's where the division headquarters went in. That's where MacArthur went in when he landed in Japan. And I joined the 27th Division after they come back home, and we were infantry. Got transferred, changed to, well, this company at that time went to part of the Division Signal Company, 27th Infantry Division Signal Company. Then we were transferred or changed to tanks. We went to the 205th Tank Battalion, later changed to the 210th Tank Battalion, and I held various jobs from, I never was a driver because I was, by that time I had been promoted to tank commander, platoon sergeant, made first sergeant. Then I got transferred to battalion headquarters in Albany, New York, where I was the operations sergeant, intel sergeant, and I spent about 18 to 20 years down in Albany. And my last about 23 months, I got transferred up to Guard headquarters, where I made Sergeant Major April 1986, I believe.
Can I ask you a question now? When you were doing this, your tank, that was in Hoosick Falls, before you got transferred up down to Albany,
Yeah,
right?
we had tanks in Hoosick Falls.
I
We used to
see.
keep them over at, underneath the railroad underpass, going into the flats
Yeah.
over there, and we could get the key and go in and drive them around a little bit over there. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
I see, and then you went into Albany, and you would go there,
I transferred to Albany as the
yeah, but that would be at night, or when did you go in? Because you worked in
our
between,
drills.
right?
I worked, our drills were basically weekends, and we had
I
our
see.
admin nights on Thursday nights. So
I see.
when I was working in Albany, I would go from Albany, the post office, to the armory, spend my admin nights, and I was working 5 days a week, so it didn't interfere with my weekend drills.
All right, let's go back and, you've got to, where did you go to work as far as when you came home
When I
after?
came home, I went back to work in the United Markets,
I see.
and I wanted something a little bit better, so I went on over to the Pownell Tannery in North Pownell. Then I changed to the wood flooring, and while I was I worked at wood flooring about 7.5 years, and when I was at Fort Benning, Georgia, going to school for the Guard, my wife got the paperwork for me there was a test opening up. And so she sent the paperwork down to me, and being that I was on active duty at the time, I could take the test when I come home. So I went to Albany, took the test all by myself.
I see.
And a few years, well, 2 or 3 years later, I met Tony Ramusky, and he said he was going to take the fellow that had the highest score. Well, I knew what one score was, but I didn't know what the other guy's score was. I knew what mine was. And I figured the guy that had the better score was smarter than I was. But so he interviewed, and he said, I'm going to take the guy with the highest score. And then a few days later, I met him outside of the bank, and he said to me, well, when do you want to come to work for me, Ray?
Oh, when was this? When did you start
Oh,
working the
boy,
post office?
I
Do you
would
have,
say
what
probably-
year? I mean, I don't care about
I would
that.
say probably 1955, 56,
see.
somewhere along there.
And you stayed with the post
Stayed
office
with the
until you
post office
retired,
Until I
right?
retired, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so now, I'm just trying to get the sequence of events here.
Yeah.
All right, so now you're in the Guard, you worked up to first
First sergeant. Yeah.
What went on in the Guard, because you've been in the Guard quite a while?
Well, I spent a lot of time in the tanks, and then after I got transferred to Guard headquarters, I didn't have to be on the tanks. I was on the, we went in the field, but we used the command post vehicles, 577. So whenever we went to the field, this was the hub of the battalion. So everything that went on in the battalion came through our headquarters.
I see. And how long did you stay in the Guard?
I spent 41 plus years in the Guard,
41 years in
plus
the
my
Guard?
Army time in the State Guard, so I had about 44 and a half years military altogether. I got to say that while we were part of the 210th Tank Battalion, we were assigned to the 30th SIB, the 30th separate infantry brigade from North Carolina. We were capstone to them, being a tank battalion, they had to have armor. We were capstone to them. We made several trips to South Carolina to train with them, and we did get a chance to go to Italy. The 30th SIB had a mission to perform in Europe. It was in Italy in the event that there was any war broke out with the Eastern Bloc nations. So we had they had a mission to perform. So we went over there and spent about 18 days working with those.
I see, in Italy. What happened during the Korean War? They didn't call your units up? Is that what happened?
We were at Fort Drum on a parade on a Saturday morning, and Governor Dewey, I can still see him standing up at the podium saying, "I don't mean if you go, I mean when you go." But we never got, the division never got called.
I see.
Back before we got a chance to go to Italy, I had a chance to go over and reforger in Germany. That was when they had these war games. They had, probably every year they had these war games. So there was 3 fellows from the 210th Tank Battalion that had a chance to go over there. We volunteered, and when I got sent to Germany, I did the same thing over there as I was doing in the battalion. I worked as the S2 NCO.
How long were you in Germany on those?
About 18 days.
Oh, about 18 days.
Yeah, yeah.
I see. You got married. What
Yeah,
year? Do you remember?
I married a girl from Second War, Jane Doherty. Ironically, when I worked in the United Markets, Jane worked for Bill Andrick. He had a studio in there upstairs in the same building. And when different days when I was waiting for a truck to come in, say like at 1 o'clock, I would go up on a fire escape and I'd sit and talk to Jane. And never thought that we'd be dating each other. So finally one night, Bill used to have pictures out in this downstairs there, and we were looking at the pictures, and she said something about, "Wouldn't you like to go to that prom or dance?" And I said, "No, I wasn't much of a dancer." So I asked her out. We went to my my alumni in probably 1947, 48, something like that, and then we started dating. And we got married in 51. Had 3 nice kids. Bill lives in Jersey. Pat married Rod Post and lives in Eagle Bridge, and Steve lives here in Hoosick Falls.
All right, so now, is there anything else you'd like to say about, I think I read you became a first lieutenant or a second lieutenant.
Yes, I went to, I took a commission in 1951, and that's why I was at Fort Benning, Georgia. I was going to school down there. It was about a 16-week infantry school. And a lot of fellows that had come back, this was in 51, 52, I think it was. A lot of fellows come back from Korea that was in the West Point graduating class. Were going back through this school, and that's where I met a fellow by the name of Arnold Gliffa. He was All-America from West Point, and that's why I still follow the Giants, because he was with the Giants. At that time, I was still working in Woodflong, and I was transferred to A Company in Troy, and it was a conflict of interest with my work, and I was working tower work, so I resigned my commission in 1955 or 56, something like that.
Yeah, we have a clipping upstairs about that. That's where I read it.
So then I went back in as a platoon sergeant, and I worked my way up through to first sergeant and so forth.
Well, good. Is there anything you'd like to say about the service or about Hoosick Falls, or is that it?
No, Hoosick Falls is a great little place to live, and thank you for having this opportunity to work with you.
Well, thank you for coming.